Hey, what's up, y'all? Welcome to Healing Myself, the podcast. I'm Scott Hayes, a licensed clinical social worker.
And I'm Shatay Hayes, producer and certified business and mindset coach.
You've just tuned in to Our Revolution. We're on a mission to help our community find freedom from the inside out. So we host conversations about God, therapy, and all the lessons we've learned about how to love, trust, forgive, and affirm ourselves first.
We used to talk about the hard parts of life. Now we talk about the healed parts because that's where true freedom resides. Join us and you'll see that when you save yourself first, you transform your life and you lead the way for those around you to save themselves too.
So, bam, we back for the first time, kind of, sort of.
Allow me to reintroduce myself.
Hey, our name is
Healing Myself. Not Hope, but actually, I'm here for it. Healing Myself, the podcast.
Yes,
Turn
Lord.
up.
So we have evolved, y'all. We are the co-host of what was formerly known as the Love Hayes podcast. We are now Healing Myself, the podcast.
Yeah.
As with all things in life, change is but a certainty. And we are evolving, we are changing. We've learned so much about ourselves, and we're pivoting into being able to recognize the opportunities to heal in the things that we experience, rather than the haze and the difficulty and everything. And I think that words matter, perspective matters. And we want to be able to identify those areas where we have the opportunity to heal, and to also give ourselves credit and teach everyone around us and invite you on a journey with us to be able to identify those times when you chose the healing.
Yeah.
And so here we are.
Here we are, Healing Myself, the podcast. You saw in episode 75, for those of you who are ride or dies and have been with us since the beginning of 2020, you probably heard in episode 75 how or not even episode 75, episode 70, we were like, we want to quit. I don't want to do this no more. We're tired. And we've reflected since then, and I think we even reflected about this in 75, is that it was an end. It was an ending of the Love Haze. It was an ending of doing things the way that we had done them before. You said we're pivoting, but I would like to say we have pivoted. Like, this is a new season, a new phase. And the amount of excitement and joy that I had before this first podcast episode, I haven't felt this way in a minute. And it probably could have been fatigue or whatever, but it feels like just a fresh start. Yeah. So we're not completely starting over. We're continuing where we left off. It's episode 76, saving yourself first. Now, speaking of that, when you save yourself first, we've said this before. We even had a whole episode, saving ourselves, SOS. We'll make sure we link that. Why is it so important to save yourself first?
I have so many thoughts on this, and I'm sure we'll unpack a lot of them. But the answer starts for me with the fact that I don't want anybody to meet my trauma before they meet me. And I want to be able to show up in relationship with people, and mostly for myself, with a clean slate, with an opportunity to not see situations through the lens of my trauma. Being able to see situations through the lens of my healing, through the lens of a belief that everybody deserves a chance to start in relationship with me from scratch, without my defenses already up about why they came, who they are, what bad intention they may have. I don't want to be bracing for a hit and those types of things. And so being able to heal myself first gives me an opportunity to start from scratch, and the person that I want to be in relationship with an opportunity to not come into a situation with me already being concerned about my worries and my old traumas, and the stuff that already happened to me, skewing the opportunity for success of that relationship.
And I think for me, we've talked about it a lot on the podcast already. One of the number one thing that I have learned over the course of these past few years in therapy is just how much your relationship with yourself impacts every other part of your life. And so to save myself first, in my opinion, means like when I do the inner work on myself, when I move past stuck places and healed old traumas and wounds, and I show up differently in my relationship to the point that you just made. I show up differently at work. I trust myself more. I'm more confident. I show up differently in the world. I treat myself better. I value my health differently. Like I set boundaries differently. So it really impacts every single part of your life. However you think about yourself, whatever you believe about yourself, that is how you show up. And
Absolutely.
So you gotta heal that relationship first. Heal the relationship with yourself first, and then everything else follow suit.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It impacts the way that you set the tone for a relationship. And I talked so much about like the importance of setting the table, the importance of like being intentional about the way that you move with folks, and being intentional about the way that I move with myself, the way that I talk to myself about myself, the way that I show up ready and willing to do something new. Um, you know, it definitely impacts the outcome of how relationship can be successful or be a complete failure if I don't heal myself first and show up ready, willing, and able to do that work. It's something that we all have to do.
Mm, mm. That's really good. I love that. So let's get into it. Let's start from the first beginning. When did you first realize like the value of saving yourself? Do you have a point in your past where you're like, you know what? Back on it. Enough is enough. Or was it gradual? Like what was the story for you?
I think it was gradual. I think I had some of those inklings early on. When I think about the relationship that I had with my dad and how he and I used to like go back and forth and really just fight a lot about like what he was teaching me about manhood versus how I saw him showing up.
Yeah.
And I was challenging him because I'm like, you're not the person that you're trying to get me to be. And as like a child at that time and trying to navigate my way into, manhood, I was thinking supposed to emulate my father.
Yeah.
And I like saw these discrepancies. And, later on down the line, learning that my dad was, dealing with his own demons, dealing with his own things that he hadn't resolved within himself. Like being in therapy and realizing that, a lot of my dad's like dissatisfaction and always like pushing me to do the next thing was really because he was dissatisfied with how far he went. So his way of trying to do that was like consistently it showed up in my life as me believing that I was never enough. But for him, it was like his own defense and his own way of like keeping me from following in those footsteps. And my initial recognition of me wanting to do something different and be my own person and heal myself, that I remember those times and being like, I don't want to be like that to people. Like I want to be able to tell people that I love them and they're enough and, I appreciate what they're doing and that type of thing. So that was one of the first times that, I remember. And then I remember being in relationship, uh, being in friendships, being in romantic relationships where I would just try to be everything.
Yeah.
Um, and never really knowing even what I liked for myself or being able to communicate what it was that I needed in relationship. And it always ended in disaster, always ended in me not being satisfied. And some of that dissatisfaction, I had to go back and realize that I was responsible for that, for not being able to say, my truth and say what it is that I needed. And those are, some of the first times I really realized that I needed to be a part of the solution. Like I needed to be like whole and on a journey at least to healing so that I would be able to tell people what I need.
Mm-hmm. For me, it was more gradual. I remember a moment in my So maybe it was my early 30s. And I had to be because I was living in Dallas at the time. And this was around the time where I really started to unlearn things from my past that no longer
Mhm.
served me. I started to sort of think about things differently. And I can't pinpoint where that necessarily came from. It makes me think about Erica Badu's song when she's like, "Intellects don't believe in God." It's
Mhm.
interesting because it was around the time I was in grad school and I was like exploring all of these different ideas and reading up a lot about, universal spiritual truths and how they relate it to creativity and movement. I will say I always had a curiosity before then,
Mhm.
but it was something around about this time in my life where I was just starting to question things differently, really interrogate things that I was taught and how I showed up in the world as a result of them
Yeah.
and deciding whether or not I wanted to keep them. And there was a moment, and I started to read a lot. It's hard to say this because I've always been a reader. I've always read books that were like self-improvement books,
Mhm.
but I was reading things, and there was a moment where I had an impulse, like a still small voice that was like, "I'm enough," or "You're enough," or something like that. And that was the first time I really noticed or realized that, oh, I didn't think I was enough before. Because I
Yeah.
remember crying and bawling at the thought of it, like, oh, I am enough. And I was like, well, dang, what did I think about myself
Yeah.
before then? And so
Yeah.
gradually since then, so it wasn't this one thing, because you just heard me say it was just in the past couple years that I realized that
Mhm.
I needed to pay attention to my relationship with myself. So I don't think back then I had the language for it.
Mhm.
I just knew I wanted to show up differently. I didn't want to just live based on the way that society or whoever taught me how to live. I wanted
Yeah.
to like show up in a different way. So it's definitely been a gradual process. And my spiritual practice, God has been with me the whole way. What was new for me, though, was therapy in these past several years. And so
Mhm.
that combination has been just really powerful
Yeah.
for me unlocking, this next level of just like healthy. That's the best way to put it, a healthy relationship with myself, which helps me to have a healthy relationship with other people.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely identify with that. Even, when I was telling you the points where, I thought about it, I think it took me being in therapy to realize, oh, that's what that
Yeah,
was.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That was the first time I can remember being uncomfortable with something that I was told. That was the first time when I think I started to develop these thoughts of not enoughness.
Yeah.
You know, and I think, a lot of times we have like these adverse childhood events that happen to us, and we don't, like you said, we don't have the language for it.
Mhm,
We
mhm.
just know and when you're sitting there in therapy and you're being challenged to go back and look at, when was the first time you really thought about not being enough, or
Mhm.
when was the first time that
Mhm.
you really thought that you were, you know bigger than the situation that you were in, or that you were made for more, or whatever it is. When you're challenged to go back and look at those things, when you're a child, you don't really think about that. You just
Mhm.
know that it's something,
Yeah.
know what it is. And I think a lot of times when you don't have the language for it, you don't really have the emotional response for it, the appropriate one anyway. And we find ourselves like crying and sad and not knowing why, and somewhere just thinking we depressed, but not knowing really what it is, just in
Mhm.
a bad mood, but not having language for it. And I think that it's good to be able to have language for those things now, to be able to say that it's something different than, even I didn't know what it was at the time, but I knew in my mind that that wasn't who I was made to
Yeah.
be.
Yeah. To your point, especially with the therapist asking you something. I remember our therapist asking me at one point early in our relationship, she said something like, "When did you stop trusting yourself?" And I was like, I don't know. But after reflecting on it, I was like, huh, that means at some point I did trust myself.
Hmm.
And then that means that something happened to make
Hmm.
me second guess that trust
Hmm.
in myself.
Yeah.
And now, not only do I got to figure out what triggered it, now I gotta figure out how to get it back and
How
like
to
not
repair.
not to let it happen again. I don't think that would have happened if I didn't have someone on the other side reflecting to me back like what the things I was processing. So it's super, super important.
Yeah. Yeah. So we used to talk about the hard parts, right? And now we talk about the healed ones. What was the healing you were moving towards?
Those, I would say this journey. So I said the pseudo origin point for me, or one of them could have been that moment when I felt that impression of I was enough.
Yeah.
And since then, what I knew, I don't think I had again the full picture of it. But for me, it was what people call like a growth mindset, right? It was just that I want to think differently. I want my mindset to match this level of life that I aspire to, not necessarily the level of life that I'm on. So that's what I was moving towards. I was like, how can I, since I was in my 20s, I had visions or just knowings like I'm gonna be a 7-figure earner, 7-8 figure. I'm gonna figure it out. I don't know how.
Yeah.
But I'm supposed to live like that. And I was always in the vision boards and things like that. So it was like a lot of me knowing, and I had been exposed to like The Secret and like the law of attraction and like, really started to understand that so much of our life, when we're in churches, sometimes the way that we're taught religion is that you just pray and wait for something outside of us to move. Sometimes that's the case. A lot of times, though, there is still something that we are to do. There's still something we have to change. There's still some action that we have to do.
Absolutely.
And so I was really on a path to like, okay, I want my thoughts to line up with higher thoughts. I want my actions to line up with higher action. So I was moving towards a version of myself that would be able to attract, receive everything that I wanted and be able to sustain it, if that makes sense. And I don't have so I can't say that, I wanted to be a healthier me so I could set boundaries. It was like, no. For me, it was like, no, my dream was, I want to be fulfilled. I want a lovely, fulfilling, happy partnership. I want abundance. I used to pray that, thank you that I'm rich in every area of my life. Beyond finances, I'm rich in joy and peace and health and love and insert all the other things. So I was moving to a version of myself that could have that.
Yeah.
What about you?
Whew. You were so enlightened as a kid. I hate it.
It was not a kid. This was 30s, sir.
Okay. I was like, that was a shit show as a youth.
This was not a kid. No, this was after the I'm enough moment.
I really think for me that when I decided that I wanted my healing is like when I started to really identify with like villains.
Say more.
I really started like having this idea of like, oh, the way that I'm being treated and the things that are happening to me, this is the way that villains are made. This is the way that people who don't give a shit about anybody are made. Like people take advantage of you and people take your kindness for weakness and
that's what you mean.
Nice guys finish last and I get to like do all these great things for other people. And is this gonna be my story? That I'm just a person who just doesn't deserve more and
It's a doormat.
Is a doormat and I don't want that.
Yeah.
So I was like, maybe it's my villain origin story. I hate everybody. Ain't doing nothing for nobody else. I am gonna be the villain. I will, because it didn't feel like people who were doing wrong by people were, losing.
Exactly.
It felt like they were winning.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, this is my villain origin story.
Yeah.
And it's everybody who shitted on me and didn't take me into account and didn't think about me, didn't call and check on me. It's their fault. I want to be able to say it's their fault. And now I'm the villain. And off to the races we go. And I think what I really realized is that I had a choice.
Mm.
And there was a part that I played in people not showing up for me. And I could take that information and make a different choice about what I asked for in relationship
Yeah.
and what I wanted for myself and give people the opportunity to either show up or not. Or I could use that information and just become a villain,
Mm.
And I think I just decided at some point that, being a villain is not who I am. But I also had to do the work around realizing that I was worthy of telling people what it is that I need
Mm-hmm.
in relationship, that I was worthy in general for myself. If not another person comes into my life, I'm worthy and I'm of value,
Mm-hmm.
and that I'll be okay whether it's by myself or if it's in relationship with friends, in relationship with, a romantic partner, whatever it is. I'm always worthy. I'm always enough. And I don't have to choose this path of least resistance that says I ain't got to do nothing since people don't know how to show up for me.
Mm-hmm.
The work that I have to do is be able to tell people what it is that I need, be whole myself, and not be dependent on anybody else to complete me, and also be grown enough to be like, hey, I don't like this. This is what I actually like, and give people an opportunity to stay or go and be okay with whatever that looks like and not lose any value if they decide not to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I had been so scared of the rejection up to that point, and that's really the hard work. That's the thing that I had to deal with. That I wasn't my part in breaking my own heart in all relationship at that point had been around the fact that I never told anybody that I need anything
Yeah.
because I was scared that I would be rejected.
Yeah.
And I was saying that people were bad people and they were misusing me, but it was really that I was misusing myself, not valuing myself enough to like say what it was that I needed in relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to at that point choose to heal and move different.
Yeah.
And make my peace with that.
And then also in your defense, in everybody's defense, like we when we know better, we do better.
Yeah.
And before we were talking about not having the language for it, there's also a part of us that we just show up according to the rules of engagement that we're most used to. And so if you think about even the dynamics in your family, like how often has anyone said what they needed or what was important to them without it being out of anger? Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So like you hadn't really had a model of that. You had to learn it and become the model for yourself and for others. So yeah, in terms of just giving yourself some grace, like we learn the hard lessons so the people after us don't have to. But
absolutely.
Yeah. So then we've talked about origin points and the healing that we're moving towards, but I still think it's important in these conversations to give like real live behind the scenes a look at what the process is. And so we both said we're moving towards this different version, this better version of ourselves. What was something that was not as you expected? Something that was just maybe it was a little harder than you thought it would be.
Oh gosh. I really thought that it was going to be easy to like set boundaries
Child, say that
with
part again.
people. I didn't realize how much that like my own self-worth was tied into what I gave to people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's great to have this story that, I stopped giving and I stopped letting people use me and I stopped doing this and I set my boundaries and this is this is what came on the back end of it. But initially it was pretty shitty because I put those boundaries up and there are people that I thought would always be there that opted out.
Yeah.
And even with their opt out, I didn't realize that number one, at first I didn't realize I would be okay. Also, I didn't realize that it would hurt not to be able to pour into that. I didn't even know what to do with the surplus that I had. I always talk about like how everything I have in my cup is for me, right? I had gotten so used to pouring out everything that was in my cup. I didn't know what to do with surplus. I didn't know what to do with like being full because I hadn't even taken time to figure out like what I enjoyed myself. being by myself, going to the movies, hanging out, whatever it was. I always did what everybody else wanted to do. And I would tell anybody, like, hey, I'm a politician, baby. I'm gonna be out here kissing babies and doing whatever everybody likes to do and hugging folk and all. But there was some portion of me that, in an unhealthy way, really enjoyed and found my joy in doing whatever everybody else liked. And that process of having to get to know myself was an uncomfortable one, because even when I did things that I didn't enjoy, there was really nobody to bounce that off of. Like, I had to contend with the fact that I made a choice, and I have to learn from it, and I have to, do something different the next time. There was no one to blame it on.
Yeah.
Like, it was just me and the choice that I had made. And like really learning myself all over again. And it wasn't pretty. It was okay. But when people tell the story, they don't always tell that part of it. Like getting to know myself, and I didn't really know what I enjoyed, you know, or the fact that I'm still in process of getting to know myself, over again at this big age, and everything that I like, and some things that I used to like not being the things that I like even at this moment. What were some of those difficulties for you?
You said it exactly, the boundaries piece. It was, I did not expect that when I started to affirm myself in a certain way or set certain expectations, the friction that it would cause in my outward relationship, and not fallouts. Well, maybe actually I did lose a friend, but like not necessarily fallouts all around me, like reality show drama, but just like more friction than I was used to. And because I'm a recovering people pleaser, right? I just often did the thing that I did a lot of things out of obligation, or because I wanted to appear to be, not appear to be, but it was important to be the good friend or the good insert, whatever. So I'll just go out of my way, even if I'm tired, even if I don't feel like it, even if I don't really have the resources, let me just show up for this person in a way that they need me to. And that often meant that I was, I ended up like depleted in a way. And so when I started to say things like, actually, this doesn't work for me, or this is what I need, there was some pushback because people had already experienced me in one way. So it was really the change management of that. Because if these were new relationships and I just showed up and said, hey, actually, I don't do this. I don't, if they're learning me that way, that's different. They're like, okay, this is how this person is, cool. But if they had already had 20 plus years experiencing me as somebody who just like goes along to get along, and then all of a sudden I'm like, I don't really want to do that, and I'm tired, and I actually can't go. I cannot believe, like, this is just a side note. In December, I didn't go to like 2 of my friends' parties because I was so exhausted. And in a previous version of myself, I would have just pushed through and gone. But I felt, no, don't get me wrong, the behind the scenes part of it, I felt awful. I was like, oh, I really want to be there for them. I love these people. I want to show up. But on the other hand, I didn't have anything. I literally didn't have the energy to give to like drive on the other side of town, fight traffic, and then have to come all the way back and then get ready and go to work the next day. And so I didn't do it. And I was so proud of myself for that. But anyways, back to what I was saying, it was just like those moments of choosing myself first.
Yeah.
Were harder. And I guess I would like to leave that, even that I've had some practice with it, it's still a little hard sometimes. But, like our life is the sum total of the choices that we make. And so at each moment when you're presented with a new choice, like which one are you going to choose? So I'm still actively in the practice of choosing myself, and that sometimes is just like uncomfortable because I do want to support the people around me, and I do want them to be happy. And it doesn't mean that I don't support, but like in every single instance, support might have to look a little different,
Yeah. And I think we all get a choice to, do something different. I can remember getting like text messages and stuff from people who would be like, hey, I can't make this thing, but let's get together and have drinks. Let's do something different. And that was like, And I used to be disappointed by those things, but I found myself like sending those texts and being like, actually, it's not that I won't ever. It's just that this time doesn't work for me because of these things that I have going on in my life, and that's okay. And it also says that I would like to see you. I
Yeah.
would like to spend some time at a time that's mutually convenient for the both of us.
Yeah.
Whereas, like you, old me would have just pushed through. Like everybody gonna be there. I ain't going.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can't turn around and expect them to show up for me if I don't show up for them.
Mm-hmm.
And like this stuff that I put my finger on over the last couple of years about things being transactional, and they don't have to be.
Yeah.
It's like the story that I've told myself, and I'm holding myself to this impossible standard when I don't have to. When I need to heal that part of me that expects that from other people and operates that way and has to, overperform in relationship even when it doesn't work for me. So I reject that.
Yeah.
And I don't have to treat myself like that.
Yeah, amen. We're gonna have to have a whole different episode around, choosing yourself and how to overcome a feeling of that being selfish. Because especially in our communities, some folks, I mean, especially when you come from the church and you're taught to serve, it's always about the other person. So, there can be feelings of like, oh, am I being selfish because I don't go out of my way to do this thing? So I'll have to make that an episode. But final question, what's the biggest lesson you've learned about saving yourself? Healing yourself first, sir.
I'm still learning lessons.
Listen.
About it. I don't even know that I can identify the biggest lesson, other than to say that, healing myself first, choosing myself first is something that I have to put into active practice every day.
Yeah.
It is like a consistent part of my life. And there will always be those thoughts that I have that challenge me to choose myself. And there will always be, like, I guess, kind of this back and forth that I'll have about making the right choice. And I'll have to, uh, my clients called it like play the tape all the way through. Like I have to work my way through that situation and then make the best decision for me. That is reflective of like my value system for myself, and also recognize the friendship that I'm in and the relationship that I'm in at the moment. And I think the perspective that I always have in it is that the relationship that I have with myself is the most important one.
That part.
And when I honor that relationship first, I can be better at honoring the external relationships that I have with other people. I do not ever want it to be a time where I choose external over internal, not in terms of validation, not in terms of like, letting things lead me to be forced into doing things that I don't want to do. It will always come from an internal place because no matter what, I am responsible for the choices that I make.
Yeah.
And if I choose this thing, I don't want to have to go back and say, I did that because they wanted me to do that.
Yeah.
And nah, it's my choice. It's my decision. I made it based on my own value system and what I feel like I had the capacity to do.
Yeah. Not living it out of obligation is something I've been working on actively. And let's see, for me, biggest lesson, I resonate with what you said about being a process, like it's ongoing. I don't think my answer is any different than what I said before, and that the thing that I've learned the most, that stood out to me the most over these past couple years in therapy, is just how important my relationship with myself is, because it impacts every other part of my life.
Yeah.
It all starts with me. And so that in it of itself was the revelation for me. And so maybe someone who's listening is hearing that for the first time. And so I just invite you to like reflect on that, process that, and like, what does that mean for your life? Like how the thing that maybe we can offer for you to think about is, what's your relationship with yourself?
Yeah.
How do you feel about yourself? Do you trust yourself? Have you forgiven yourself? Do you honor yourself? Are you happy about yourself? Yeah, so think about some of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. I would also say that give yourself permission to just be learning,
Yeah.
What's important to you, to be doing the best that you can, to be like at all times honoring the fact that you don't have it all figured out.
Yeah.
that healing myself is a process. It is something that will be ongoing work. And there will be like ebbs and flows and ups and downs. And, there will be days when I'll take a couple steps forward and days when I'll take a couple steps back.
Yep.
And, but I always have an opportunity to get up and make a different choice the next day.
Yep.
And to get better at it the next day. Speaking of that, the one thing we not changing.
What?
Is music for the moment, Charlotte.
We cannot. It's too much a part of who we are.
Yeah.
To change that would be to change ourselves. And we ain't doing that, y'all.
I ain't doing none of that.
Yeah.
Folks.
Yeah.
So, that said, what does this moment feel like? You just itching.
I know. This is like one of my favorite parts of our whole podcast experience because the music is so important to us. Y'all, I know it's sort of a different context of this song, but Fantasia, Doing Me. I'm doing me this time. Listen, I was said I wasn't going to sing because I'm a little hoarse today, but I couldn't not. When I played
it anyway.
I know, right? I'm doing me. I'm doing me. She said, listen, learn how to put myself first, period. Okay? That's this whole vibe. Again, not in a selfish way, but it's like you can't put, somebody else's worth or value above your own. Like, yeah.
For me, it is this song by Gift. It's called They Just Don't Know. And it is just reflective of the fact, like, you see me, like, in this moment. You don't know what it took to get here.
Yeah.
You have no idea, of what I've been through and that type of thing. Also, they just don't know because I'm showing up as, like, a better, my favorite version of myself.
Yeah.
Doing the work behind the scenes, and they just don't know what it took for me to get here. But also, you just don't know because I'm not showing up with my trauma leading me.
Yeah.
I'm not showing up in this space giving you stuff that you didn't, earn from me. I'm not showing up bleeding on people that didn't cut me. They just don't know. Gift.
That's a word. Yeah, so we done made it to the end. I'm gonna have to use my notes for this one because it's the first time around. Okay, y'all, so bear with me. So, this is the point. If you made it to this section of the podcast, you obviously are rocking with us a little bit. You obviously like it. So we're gonna invite you to follow, subscribe, rate, do all the things. Send it to a friend, share it with friend or family. We really, really appreciate it. Yeah. A couple other ways we'd love to draw you into our world of healing ourselves and saving ourselves first. We'd love for you to subscribe to our newsletter. In our show notes, you'll see a link where you can subscribe to our weekly word. We send out links to our conversation, so you won't even have to come and find us. We'll send it directly to you in your inbox. We have all kinds of events and all the things. Like, join the newsletter. You'll get access to all of those. You can find us at healingmyself.co. I almost said our old website, healingmyself.co. And you can have access to everything that we have, events, merch, all the ways we affirm our love and life. And we're signing off. How are we doing this? Here we go, y'all. Tell us what you think about this new sign off, okay? Let's make the choice to heal ourselves first. Because when we do, we change our lives and we lead the way for those around us to do the same. And?
I like that. You did good, girl.
Thank you. You gonna close us out?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I'll tell you what ain't gonna change. You're not alone.
Yeah.
Join us next time. We're going to take this journey together. Also invite y'all, when you in our comments, hashtag save yourself first. Let us know when you chose the healing, when you chose you first. All right, y'all. We'll be right back at it next time. All right. Peace.